And we are live. So, what shall we talk about today? All right. All right. So, I get up this morning and I check my headlines at CNN. CNN is not, the most unbiased source, but the headlines are headlines, right? So, we'll start with the headlines. Turns out, I'm going to have to put my glasses on here to make sure I get this right. Turns out, there's a guy in Canada named Brian Pare. He's from Quebec, so I think it's French. Pare, something like that. Pardon to my French-speaking listeners. Anyway, so he's going to prison in Quebec for arson. He's going to prison for arson. He wasn't just setting any kind of fires, though. He was setting fires in the forest in Canada. Now, that should ring a bell. Ding, 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 ding. Yes, there were a lot of fires in Canada. So what was he doing setting fires to the forest in Canada? The shock. Was he a climate activist? Was he trying to make people fearful of climate change by setting fires to the forest of Canada, and the smoke swirling and going into New York, and orange skies and terrible pictures on the internet, and fires and orange skies, and the sun never visible in the sky, and orange skies, and can't breathe, and air quality index is unhealthy, and orange skies. And well, he was an activist, right? He was a climate activist. He's trying to terrify people into overreacting to climate change, and passing legislation, and so he was a climate activist, and he was setting fires, or maybe he was working for the government. The government is also climate activists, and orange skies and air too unhealthy to breathe, and we must do something. Please save the children, and stop climate change, and take away freedoms, and take away fossil fuels, and take away big cars with huge tires that throw mud all over the place and run over rabbits, and get rid of all the freedoms, and get rid of all the guns. And oh my God, it's just terrible. It's the climate activists and the government activists, and it's the climate change and freedoms, and all that. Was that who he was? Brian Pare? Well, no, he wasn't, actually. Let's just step back a little bit. He wasn't doing those things. Now, the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, had been criticized herself, as I assume that's a woman's name, maybe it's not, for refusing to respond directly to questions about climate change having an influence on the fires. And instead, she said that it was arsonists. It was arsonists, probably. Could be, right? And when we had massive fires here in California, record-breaking fires that were so bad that they permanently broke the insurance industry in California. Permanently broke it. You almost can't get home insurance in California right now. It's almost not possible. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a currently seated member of the U.S. Congress, said at the time the major California fires that broke the entire insurance industry, maybe even globally, broke the entire global insurance industry, was caused by Jewish space lasers. You remember that? Jewish space lasers. I mean, she's hitting all the buttons, right? It's not just climate activists. It's not just government conspiracies. It's the Jews running the government and the climate, hoax, and using space lasers and climate activists, and swirling smoke, and never see the sunrise, and they're after our freedoms, they're after our guns, they're after our oil, they're destroying America whiteness, and they're going to get rid of everybody, and everyone's going to be sent off to concentration camps because they've been using fossil fuels, and Jewish space lasers, and activists, and orange skies, and can't breathe the air, and think of the children. And that's Marjorie Taylor Greene, a member of Congress, the U.S. Congress, still a member of Congress to this day. Jewish space lasers. And in Canada, in Alberta, which is like Mordor on Earth, Alberta, that's where the tar sands are. Alberta is up to their eyebrows in fossil fuel extraction. They've destroyed huge parts of the community up there, contaminating water resources and destroying the forest and polluting the air. And it's Mordor, man. You just see pictures of it. It just looks like something out of Lord of the Rings. So, yeah, she says it was arsonists. Arsonists, yeah. People setting the fires deliberately to make sure we overreact to, their threat of climate change. It's theirs. They created it. They invented it. And, so that's, these are their storm troops going out and setting fires. No, this guy was not one of those people. This guy was one of these people. He was a climate change denier. Brian Pare, a climate change denier, and had lots of writings of his own about how the fires in Canada, which is where he's from, were being set by climate change activists and government provocateurs, and it was the government, and it was all arson. Not all of it, most of it was arson, and it's all a conspiracy. It's all a hoax. It's meant to get us all stirred up. And he was saying this, and he was going out there setting fires. He was the arsonist. He was the arsonist. Now, now you read that and you think, oh, well, that's ironic. And then you turn over to the sports section, right? And you read about the sports. But you got to stop. You got to stop for a minute. And you got to ask yourself, what the hell was that about? What? Here's a guy who's a climate change denier. He's obviously big into it, writing about how the fires are arson caused by climate activists who want to seize our freedoms. And he's the guy. He is the guy. He did it. Out there setting fires. For what? To make us afraid of climate change? He's the one saying it's a conspiracy. And yet he's out there setting the fires. And, the fires had that effect on people. People saw the orange skies and the sun hidden from in the smoke, and couldn't breathe the air, and couldn't exercise, and couldn't even take your dogs outside. And children had to miss school, and the orange skies and the bad air quality and the pictures of the flames leaping hundreds of feet into the sky and the orange skies. And he was doing that. Now, the only reason anyone thought there was arsonists was because the climate activists were trying to support their hoax of climate change, and that climate change is a hoax. And without fires or something else, it's, they can't, there's no excuse. It's just a hoax. There are no really fires. There's no climate change. It's the climate activists that came up with all this. And so they have to go out and set the fires to make sure that there's something to talk about. Right? This guy was a denialist, setting fires. Because he thought, watch this. Watch how this works. He thought there were people setting the fires. He was the guy setting the fires. I mean, you just have to stop and ask yourself, what was he trying to accomplish? What was in his head? What was his mental state? What was his mental state when he was the guy throwing lit matches into the brush? When he was at home, he was writing about how climate change activists, he's not a climate change activist. The fires would get people agitated about climate change and global heating, and would get people out there to elect politicians who are going to maybe do something. Not that they could. I mean, I have countless videos on how they don't do anything, and they never will do anything. But that was his narrative. Okay, he's bought this narrative that someone's going to make changes. Changes. Oh my God, I can't have that. No. Okay, so you think he'd be worried about fires in Canada, in orange skies and no air to breathe and all this stuff? Okay, you think he'd be worried about that? And you would think that he would be maybe even a little careful. And if he's going to write about the arson and the fires in Canada, and it's all a government conspiracy and it's space lasers, do you think that he would be appalled at the fires? And why would he be appalled? Oh no, they're burning my forest. That's terrible. No, that's not why he would be appalled. Oh, look, people are going to think there's such a thing as climate change. They're going to blame this on climate change. We can't have forest fires. They're going to blame it on climate change. Even if there is no climate change, they're going to blame the fires on climate change. And he's setting the fires. he's not, he is not serving his cause by setting the fires. And yet he was setting the fires. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene was doing something a little bit different. And you know, and it didn't have to be Jewish space lasers, did it? But it was. And so, what game is she playing? I wonder. I wonder what game she could be playing with that kind of outlandish claim. But they're obviously doing this. They're obviously trying to stir people up. What was this guy doing setting fires? Now, I'm not a psychotherapist, and I don't study this kind of criminal behavior. I'm not what would it be? A criminal therapist, a criminal psychologist, one of those CSI people who follows around criminals and looking at their obsessive compulsive disorder and gathering the evidence and saying, this criminal has the following mental illness, right? And Sherlock Holmes style, right? I'm not that person. I just watch people. I watch what they do. I do watch what they say, but I really watch what they do. And, from that, you can build a picture. So, but this guy was obviously deep down the rabbit hole of climate change denial. Probably half of America, half of Canada, half of the developed world is deep, deep, deep down the rabbit hole of climate change denial. Some of them are so deep down it that it just really affects their ability to think clearly about anything. Seriously. They probably can't have a conversation with a family member without bringing up climate change conspiracies when they go deep enough down the rabbit hole. So this guy was obviously way down the rabbit hole. Lots of people are way down the rabbit hole of conspiracy. Now, let's be very clear. Global heating is a thing. This is just science, it's physics. We got thermometers, right? We can measure the temperature. That's interesting. And you can say, well, that's not how you do it. That can't work. My thermometer could be different. I could put my thermometer in the house. And all of a sudden, oh, look, the thermometer's warmer. Neener, neener, neener. Okay, well, that's not how science works. Do you think scientists don't know how science works? And thermometers? Some of the thermometers are in space, I suppose, with the Jewish space lasers, depending on how you want to slice this. So yeah, global heating is a thing. It's a thing, people. It's a real thing. Oh, and if you weren't completely on board with that, or that had you scratching your head, how can the world get warmer? Just look at the weather. Just look around, pay attention. Oh, and by the way, not to go too much aside, in 3, 4, 5 years, probably less than that, maybe 3 years, things are going to be so hot that the very notion that anyone's going to say that the Earth isn't getting hotter, it's just going to be ludicrous. It might even be illegal. It might even to deny climate change might become the equivalent of yelling fire in a theater. To deny climate change might be so detrimental that just having that conversation, just espousing that, could become a felony. It could. If climate change denial becomes an existential threat in itself, climate change is an existential threat. Global heating is a threat. What if climate change denial became a threat? It could. Now, I don't know how that's going to happen, but what if it did? Well, then it could become illegal to even have that kind of speech. We have laws on speech. There are certain things you can't do, and there are certain things you can be sued for if you do them. And it could be that it just becomes illegal to have this speech anymore. That's how bad things could get. I'm not saying that's how bad politics could get. That's how bad things could get. That if you talk like this, you are a threat to humanity because things are really bad and we have to do something. Oh, I guess we'll see, right? We'll see. My point is, you don't have to understand the physics. You just don't. You just maybe have to live on this earth, hang around on this earth a while longer, and pretty soon everyone is just peeing their pants over what's happening around them. That could easily happen because it's physics, because that's where we're headed. We're going to get to that point. We're going to get to a point where people are going to be wetting themselves over what's happening in their life, not the threat to their life, not the talk about the life, not the possibilities about your life, not the rumors about your life, but what's actually happening in your life could cause people to just wet themselves. I guess we'll see, won't we? But it is physics. So let's just get that part down. Global heating is real. Climate change is the result of a lot of global heating. And we're going to see both global heating, which is physics, and climate change, which is the Earth's response to physics. We'll see. I guess we'll see. It's real. Well, we'll see what happens. You're not going to like it. You are not going to like it. Oh boy. People already don't like it, and you are not going to like it too. Whoever you are, wherever you are, you're not going to like it. You're not going to get out of this. You're not going to escape this. And this guy was running around setting fires. He wasn't setting fires because he was a climate activist. He was setting fires because he was a denier. Why? What? There's a thing about denial. There's a thing about denial. People who do this, people who are deep in denial about something important, are weak. They're at least weak-minded. They don't have good mental defenses. We know people who are strong in adversity, right? And when there's the earthquake or the flood or the riots or whatever, there are people who kind of naturally sort of keep their shit together, right? As we say, they keep themselves wired up, and they can function, and they assume leadership if the leadership is needed, and they go forward. And then when it's all over, they go back to their normally scheduled life. They have no desires. They simply have a strong will and a strong mental attitude. And so when things get bad, they can continue to function. And then there are people on the other end of that who have weak minds. They have weak minds. They're just weak, right? It's an average. There are people with strong minds, and there are people with weak minds. And people with weak minds have a very different experience during disasters. They fall apart. They fall apart. They fall apart. Weak-minded. They have no mental strength. They can't organize themselves around responding to something. They just collapse, and they're weak-minded. They're whatever. And they can fall into all kinds of mental pathology as their world falls apart around them. And sometimes a slower moving disaster will create more mental instability than a quick one. Sometimes a quick disaster will stimulate your basal instincts for fight or flight, right? You just run away. Oh my God, run away, hair on fire, running. But if it's a slow moving disaster and it just comes at you from all sides, you could just shrink with it, right? You just go inwards as you're being surrounded by disastrous things that you don't understand, and you're not sure what to do, and no one else is doing anything, and you're reliant on people to do things for you or tell you what to do or be leaders or tell you what the conspiracy is or what's fearful about this, and you don't know what to do, and so you just sort of shrink. And as you're shrinking, because you have a weak mind, as you're shrinking, then your inner reaction to this starts to crack and spew out in all directions. And you get manifestations of cognitive dissonance, you get denial, you get abreaction, you get hysterical behavior. People who see their entire community on fire and are standing in the middle of the street laughing, right? Look at this. This is amazing. Look at that house burning. I never liked that guy. Sort of like, a little bit like Trumpism, right? Where people celebrate disaster, just celebrate it. look at the blood and look at the things falling down and fire and destruction and yeah, it's all the bad things in the world, the sin and the rapture is going to take me away. And I'm going to rapture and I'm going to look down from heaven on all this and it's just going to burn. It's just going to fall and they're going to suffer and I'm going to love it because I'm the right person. Okay. Well, that's mental weakness. You're not rapturing anywhere. Okay. And it's just surrounded you and you've enclosed and you've just been broken so badly. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to think. And so you start all these strange mental behaviors start squirting out of your broken exterior. And this guy was obviously, he was a climate change denier and he had all these deep conspiracies. The government is setting the fire and the Jewish space lasers and the climate activists are going out into the forest and setting fires to panic everyone into giving up on fossil fuels and giving away their guns and their freedoms and their everything else. And that was his belief system. He wrote about it. They know what his belief system was. And then he was out there setting the fires. He was setting the fires. How does that happen? How does a person who has completely denied there's a problem and that any symptoms of the problem are a conspiracy end up being that guy? He's sitting in his living room. He's pounding out, 48-page manifestos on how it's all fake and it's all a conspiracy and the government and the HARP and the Jewish space lasers. Bang, 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 bang. He's sitting in his living room, hammering out 48 pages of manifestos 3 times a week. Bang, 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 bang. Okay. And then he gets up, gets a box of matches, and goes out in his car and sets fires. The fires are a fake. The fires are a hoax. Jewish space lasers. And he's out there setting the fires. What? How is that even connected? These people are living in a fantasy. They're living in a fantasy that there's not a problem. There is a problem. There is a huge, big, fat turd of a problem. And they're pretending they're not standing in a big, fat, steaming turd. La, 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 I don't see any turds. La, la, there's no problems. Okay? They are in denial. They need denial. Denial is their balm. Denial is their bulwark against losing their minds. Denial is what allows them to get in their car, and drive down the road to Starbucks to get their latte, spewing carbon out the back of their 18-wheeler, whatever they're driving, whatever they drive to get around every day. And so it's all a hoax. I'm going to fire up my car. And all the disasters in the world are not my fault because it's a hoax. And by the way, if there's a fire up there, well, that was set by the climate activists. That wasn't because of climate change, and that's not because of my behaviors. That fire, all those fires that on the news and the orange sky and can't see the sun in the air, you can't breathe, all that, that's climate activists. That's how they do it. That's how they do it. And so this guy was sitting there, banging out large manifestos about how it's all the climate activists that are doing all the fire and the Jewish space lasers. And, Marjorie Taylor Greene is the most brilliant person ever wrote anything. Okay. So he grabbed the matches and made it so. He picked up the matches, went out into the forest and made it so. He needed someone to be doing that. He was so deranged. He was so broken by what is happening in his world and in his private life. He was so screwed up that he had to make sure there was someone setting fires. And so he decided to be that person. This makes no sense, right? This makes no sense. But he did it. He did it. And then he confessed to it. He confessed to it. Oh, well, excuse me, sir. That's a government conspiracy. He's a plant. He's a Fed. He's not really. He's Antifa. He's not really, a denialist. He didn't write any of that stuff. That's all a plant. That's all the federal government. Yeah. You think you've got the guy who set the fires and he confessed to it and he was a climate change denier. Oh, please. I got 2 legs. Pull the other one. Yeah, well, they're in the pipeline, right? That this guy was a government plant, a Fed, a Mountie, and he was hired or whatever to go out and set fires to give the movement, the climate change denial movement a bad name. Well, why did Marjorie Taylor Greene blame it on space lasers? She didn't have to do that, but she did. So what is wrong with these people? They need their dream, their fever dream to be real. They need it to be real. And they are so anxious that they're wrong that they make it happen exactly the way they think it is. They are so deep in denial. They are so committed to the thing, the conspiracy, that they actually make the conspiracy happen. They are the conspiracy that they are fearful of. They become the thing that most terrifies them. They become the thing. Now, that's happening in American politics right now. That's happening in American politics. I'm not going to go into it. I don't have time. And frankly, I'm not that interested. Oh, and by the way, I'm not even sure I disapprove. I could tell you why. I don't disapprove of it, but I'm not going to right now. My attitude is basically, bring it. Yeah, that's what you're going to do. You're going to play this out. You're going to LARP this whole thing. You're going to cosplay this whole thing. You're going to become the thing that terrifies you. Okay, yeah, bring it. I'm not going to stop you. I'm just going to sit back here and watch. Bring it. If it's that important to you that there be dark government conspiracies, so much so that you're going to become that conspirator, okay, yeah, bring it. Go ahead. I want to see it. I want to watch you become the thing that you fear the most. I want to see it. Bring it. Bring it on. Let's see you do it. Because that's what's happening in American politics. And that's what this guy did. Now, we are all Brian to some degree or another. I'm not. Because I'm not a climate change denier. I'm on the other side of the street compared to all these people, probably including you, right? I'm way on the other side of the street. I am way, way, way deep into acceptance. You should be too, but that depends on your mental strength. Are you weak-minded or are you strong-minded? If you have a strong mind, then when the evidence hits you and you understand that, you got a problem, well, then you'll say, all right, if that's what's happening, there's a problem, I got a problem, a personal problem, then I'm going to fix that. That's what strong-minded people do. This is what we're doing. All right, let's do it. Let's go. Let's get on with it. What do we need? Do we have everything we need? Get some stuff, whatever we have to do, and we're going to do this. All right. That's what a strong-minded person does. That's what a natural leader does. They get on with it. And after that, then they go on to do something else because it's not a big deal. They just had to respond to something. Weak-minded people obsess about it. They obsess about it until their mind breaks. And then they become the thing that they were most terrified of. And we see that happening everywhere, all over the place. And this guy, Brian Pare, he's now the poster child for that. And everybody who's in denial, even if it's a little bit of denial, or it's kind of not real acceptance, or I was more accepting than I am now, or I could be more accepting of the evidence, but it's just kind of scary, and I don't know if I really want to go there. All these different versions and variances of denial, right? That's basically everybody. Almost everybody is in some kind of denial. Okay, fine. I sort of get it. Global heating is physics. It's really complicated. There's lots of charts and numbers and watts per square meter and forcings and the aerosol masking effect and how much CO2 was emitted into the atmosphere by human activity this year compared to last year, and is it going up or is it going down, and and how long does it take CO2 to be removed from the atmosphere, and what about methane and aerosol masking effect and watts per square meter, and it's like your eyes glaze over, and I kind of understand. Now, you could simply accept the science. I mean, that is one approach. You could say, oh, well, people who are qualified to understand this, who spent their lives studying this, who are, have no real axe to grind. They're just looking at the data, looking at the thermometer and saying, "Ooh, wow, look at this. Ooh, wow, that's interesting." When did that become a thing? Well, go folks, we have a thing. We have a thing now. Okay, let's talk about global heating. Okay, you could just follow the science. You don't really understand the thermometers and the satellite data and the tree rings and the ice cores and the dendrochronology and the paleoclimatology and the whatever. You don't understand all that stuff. That's fine. You don't have to. I don't expect you to. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Maybe you want to. Maybe you should learn something. Maybe you should educate yourself. It's kind of interesting what we've done to the planet. Oh, and also what has happened to the planet, but even before we showed up. It's all very interesting. I mean, this is our planet, right? It's something we should know about. We learn about childhood development because we know that children go through developmental phases, and we'd like to follow those and be there when they do it and help, maybe, and certainly not get in the way, right? Childhood development is a thing. Every mommy knows childhood development. And so she tries to be there and have the things and be the mommy and be the parent and help the child go through childhood development steps. We know childhood development. We study it. And when someone comes along and says, oh, yeah, childhood development, let me tell you how that works. All children go through the same phases. It's amazing. It's amazing to watch. It's fun. It's intimidating to this little tiny little person who's going through all these phases. And then the mommies just follow along. Oh, childhood development. Okay, well, that's how it is. Then that's fine. You don't have to be, a clinical psychologist to understand childhood development. All you have to be is a mommy, a parent, right? And so now you watch your children develop, and by the time you get 2 or 3 kids, out the door, well, then you know something about childhood development personally. But before you knew it personally, you could simply follow the science, right? You could do that. Nothing wrong with that. You're not capitulating your freedoms. You're not giving up responsibility. You're simply saying, oh, yeah, I'd like to be as good a parent as I can be. And there's data on childhood development. Sure, why not? And more people who have children should know how this works. In fact, maybe it should even be a law that you can't have children at all until you've taken a class on childhood development. That's one thought, right? Oh, reproductive freedom. Okay, so I would never advocate that. But absolutely, it should be there for you if you're a parent or expecting to be a parent, and you could take a class on childhood development completely free with other parents. It would be fun, right? You meet new people, you create a little network of support, and you'd all be learning childhood development. Later on, you can help each other raise your children because you all had the same class. That'd be kind of cool, right? Wow, actually, that's a great idea. Not required, just something you can do. And if you're a concerned parent and you want to do the best you can for your children, you would do that. You can do the same thing with climate change. There should be classes all over the place. Well, we have YouTube, so I guess, this is your resource. You could learn it. You learn all that complicated sciencey stuff. You could, or at least, expose yourself to it and pick up the nuances of what's happening around us. You could do that. It's not as simple as childhood development, although children are pretty complicated, but you could learn it, right? You could. If you wanted to know something and do the right thing, you could do that. Just like a parent with a child, you could do it. Oh, I want to know more about childhood development. I want to know more about children. Yeah, you could do that. And if you were concerned, you would do that. And parents all the time learn these things so they can be better parents and enjoy the process of being a parent and have a better experience all around for everybody. You could do it. And you could do it with climate change. You don't have to be ignorant, and you don't have to be a denialist. I don't really know where denialism comes from, really. I'm sort of naturally curious about things. When someone comes along and says, yeah, this is what's happening in the Arctic. This is what's happening with the polar bears. I think, really? That's interesting. I'd hate to lose the polar bears. So what's happening with the polar bears? Well, the ice and the things they eat and the seals and finding habitat to reproduce and finding ways to get around when there's no ice anymore to walk on. And yeah, that is interesting. Oh, that's fascinating. That's really happening. Oh, yeah. And that's climate change up there in the north. Yep. Yeah, it seems to be. There doesn't seem to be any going back now. Well, that's not good for the polar bears. I wonder if we could lose the polar bears. Well, we might. Oh, except for the ones in zoos, I suppose. Keep those guys alive. But yeah, wow, we might lose polar bears. Polar bears are kind of iconic. It's like Santa Claus and polar bears, right? Icons from the north. Yeah, that would really change our world if we didn't have the polar bears. I guess we could still have Santa Claus, right? We still have Santa Claus, North Pole, Santa Claus in his workshop. We can still have that, but we can't have the actual polar bears. Or maybe even eventually the reindeer. We couldn't have the reindeer. There couldn't be real reindeer, but we could still have Santa Claus. And that's kind of where all this is headed, right? So no, you can't have your old climate. You can't have your old global average temperature. You can't have those things anymore. Those things are going away, but you can have your make-believe, right? You can keep that part, the Santa Claus version of all those things. Yeah, you can have that. That's fine. But it won't sustain you. And this guy, Brian Pare, lost his shit. And he was the guy setting the fires. The guy setting the fires. And Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks it's Jewish space lasers. That sucks. Lots of people think it's because she said all that. But I don't think she's that creative. I don't think she came up with that on her own. I think she probably plucked that off of some Reddit on the internet or Facebook or something, or TikTok, Twitter. Somebody tweeted something. And she thought, wow, that's amazing. That must be the real reason. Jewish space lasers. Who would have thunk it? Well, I would have thunk it because I believe it already. And, so now that's a meme. That's something we got to deal with. And Brian Pare in Quebec was setting fires in Canada because he thought someone was setting fires in Canada. You see where this is headed? It's not just enough for these people that they be in denial. They have to become the thing that they fear the most. What do people fear? Afraid of losing their freedoms? Well, maybe they become the people who take away freedoms. They're worried about, food supplies being interrupted. Maybe they become people who interrupt food supplies just to prove their point. Wow. This becomes a whole new level of what they call stochastic terrorism. Stochastic terrorism. Stochastic terrorism is a strange creature, and you better start thinking about this. Stochastic means random. I know what terrorism means. We can forget that one, but stochastic is different. They're state-sponsored terrorism, right? So that's your Islamic Jihad and your ISIS and, political extremists of all colors and sizes and stripes. State-sponsored terror. I can't even speak this morning for some reason. State-sponsored terrorism. Try saying that real fast 3 times. State-sponsored terrorism is not random. It is predictable. We've had a lot of it. The FBI, the CIA, they're always tracking these groups that are, going to be doing terrorist things, and they're going to be, jihadists, and they're going to be malcontents, and they're going to be Ted Kaczynski, Unabombing, and all this, state-sponsored terrorism. People who've got their beef, legitimate or otherwise, but they have their ideology, and because of their ideology, they are predictable. And then there's this stochastic terrorism. Now, stochastic terrorism is kind of a new thing. I mean, it was always there, but it's really becoming a problem right now. And you get stochastic terrorism, random terrorism, from people who are weak-minded, who lose their shit. And we're seeing it's all over the place now. And in fact, state-sponsored terrorism is sort of, either it's on the wane or it's just not important enough to report on anymore. State-sponsored terrorism is now not hardly even a thing. And there's so much stochastic terrorism, people just losing their minds. No, the U.S. has a big problem with gun violence, and and the most terrifying aspect of that is in the schools, right, or the malls, or the synagogues, or the churches, or wherever. Okay, that's all 100% stochastic terrorism. It's just one person, not connected to any group, not connected to any government or ideology. Maybe sort of an ad hoc ideology that there's conspiracies everywhere and there's hoaxes everywhere, and that's my ideology. I'm surrounded by lies and brain manipulation and Jewish space lasers. That's me. That's my that's your excuse for losing your mind. So what that is, you did it to yourself almost entirely. Always you do it to yourself, and it's random. Who breaks first? Who breaks next? How many people break? A bunch of big breaks coming up. Who always going to be broken? Okay. And what are they going to do about it? Well, that's stochastic terrorism. So this guy, Brian Pare, in Quebec, he was basically a stochastic terrorist. He lost his fucking mind. Now, what pathway did he go down that he became the thing that he feared most, which is climate change activists setting fire to forests? He became the guy who set fires to forests. This is really super important. I don't know how to explain how important this is. The guy who was in denial about climate change, who thought that any fires were being set by climate change activists, and they were doing it for the reason to prove their point. He became the guy who proved the point himself. How the hell? What series of buttons got pressed in his brain? What series of dots did he connect that he became the thing that he feared the most? Because let's just assume he really feared that people would take climate change seriously. He really feared that there were climate activists going up into the forest and setting fire to the forest to prove their point, get people panicked. He must have really been afraid of that. And then he became the thing. How the hell does that happen? How does that happen? He lost his mind. Now, this is going to happen a lot. This kind of stochastic terrorism is going to happen a lot. I mean, you have to imagine that the person who goes to the school and kills the principal and the teachers and the students, that person is afraid. What are they afraid of? Being killed? And then they become the thing. There was no thing. It was in his head. And then he became the thing that was in his head. This Brian Pare in Canada was fearful that activists and Jewish space lasers were setting fires to the forest, and then it was going to turn everything upside down, and they're going to take away our freedoms and take away our gas and take away our cars. And he was fearful of this, and he was speculating on it, and it's all a conspiracy. It's a dark, terrible conspiracy. And he became the thing. He became the guy setting fire to the forest. And no, he was not a climate activist, and no, he was not a scientist, and no, he was not a government subversive. He was a climate change denier, worried that people were setting fire to the forest to prove their point. He became that. This is not an accident. This is not a one-off. This is happening everywhere. Stochastic terrorism is on the rise. And something I tell my wife once in a while when these topics come up, I say, yeah, these people are losing their fucking minds. They're losing their minds. They are so filled with grief, and they are so filled with terror, and they are so afraid of the future, and they are so afraid of losing something, okay, whatever it is. They come up with 100,000 different things that they're going to lose. If you look at the list, it's usually bullshit, right? It's just like, what? Why would you be worried about that? You don't even need that. No one needs that. And you're afraid of losing it, and you're going to set fire to the forests so that you don't lose the thing. Well, you're going to lose the thing because you set fire to the forest. People have a long list of things that they're fearful of, and it's breaking their minds. Their minds are breaking. And no one knows that their mind is broken when their mind is broken. Everybody is so deep in the rabbit hole, they've got their heads so far up their ass that they don't know they're broken. They don't know they're insane. They don't know they've lost their mind. They think they are the only sane person in the world. And they've lost their mind. And then they do insane things. And you can sit back and say, oh, that was pretty unhinged. Going to a school and killing 16 people, and we find out later, and later on they say, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. What? But you did it. What were you thinking at the time? I don't know. I just, was not settled in my mind. I feel much better now. It's like, what? You feel better now? What? Well, what was going on then, Brian, when you were flicking matches into the forest? Yeah, you're better now. You're sorry now. What was going on at the time? Could you please let us know? We'd like to know. We think this is a problem, Mr. Stochastic Terrorist. Why did you do this? What compelled you? Well, America, just to pick one, because I live here and I pay attention to these people, is filled with people that are filled with anxieties. And they're the weakest among them, the weakest minds are breaking first. No surprise. And when they break, They become stochastic terrorists. That's it. Or they kill themselves, or they kill themselves and their family, not in that order. Um, and if that's not pleasing enough to them, or if that doesn't discharge their anxieties enough, or that doesn't massage their ego enough, then before they kill themselves and kill their family, not in that order, they go out and they kill a bunch of other people. They're stochastic terrorists who have lost their mind. Why did they lose their mind? Well, go read their manifesto. They got several of them, and they posted it to Reddit, and then they TikToked it about, and they TikToked themselves in their bedroom massaging their gun, right? And they said it all out there. It's all in public. No one took it seriously, of course. Well, he said he was going to do it. I didn't know he was going to do it, but he said he was going to do it. Yeah, but I didn't know he was that crazy. Everybody's that crazy these days. If they say they're going to do it, they're going to do it. Donald Trump is going to be a dictator on day one. Oh, Donald Trump. No, he's going to do it. All right. He's going to do that. And if Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks it's Jewish space lasers, she thinks that. And if she has to act on that, she'll do it. She'll become the thing that she's most fearful of. These people are not sharp, and they have weak minds, and they're terrified. And there's a lot of bad things going down in the world. And the worst of them is global heating. And it's a thing nobody can fix. Nobody can fix this. Do you think you can fix this? Oh, really? Really? Then you're in denial. Now, what have I been saying about people in denial? Yeah. You can't fix this. You need to fix yourself. You need to follow the science. You need to accept reality. You need to accept reality. And if it's scary, and if it's threatening, and if it's going to be changes, and you don't want changes, well, too bad. Buckwheat, you're in it. Both feet up to your eyeballs, okay? You got to accept that now, starting now. And you have to accept your responsibility. You have to accept the role you played. You have to accept the fact that your entire globalized, industrialized civilization is wallowing in fossil fuels. And you're part of that. And you're going forward. And you're on that Titanic. And you have to accept that. Go read yourself some science. Go read yourself some James Hansen articles. Figure it out. You're in there. You both feet. You're in. Your fossil fuels up to your eyeballs. Accept it. And if it's terrifying, that it means that everything you know that is sacred and eternal is not, well, then that's just your reality too. You're driving to Starbucks to get your latte is not sacred and eternal. It's a thing you do that you don't have to do, that maybe, surely in the future, you won't be able to do. Is that a problem for you? Are you going to become one of those stochastic terrorists who finally hits their limit? Now they're taking away my Starbucks. Now my gasoline at the station costs me $13 a gallon. And I don't like it. And it's a conspiracy. And it's the activists. And it's the, Jewish space lasers. And now I have an AR-15. And I'm going to go out and fix this because it's a great conspiracy. $13 a gallon. What kind of America is this? It's communism. It's fascism. It's socialism. Give me my AR-15. I'm going to go out. I'm going to straighten this out, because you hit your limit, $13 a gallon. That was it. That was your limit. Other people were breaking it $5 a gallon. Jewish space lasers and setting forests on fire and climate activists. It's all their fault. It's all a hoax. Donald Trump was right at $5 a gallon, or $6 or $7 or $8. Maybe your limit is $13 a gallon, but you'll be right out there with the rest of them, demanding your freedoms and your luxuries and your sacred, eternal American way of life, or whatever it is, because you're in denial. You are in denial. You're not accepting the fact that this shit show is over. You'll be the one. You're next. Someone you know is next. Someone you thought had their shit wired up tight doesn't. And you don't either. There's a point where everyone's going to break. Everyone's going to break, and they're going to become conspiratorial and Jewish space lasers and activists and blame the scientists. They could have told us different. They could have told us sooner. They could have told us in words we understood. It's the scientists' fault. It's all their fault. It's not my fault, bitch. I'm here telling you. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. You're in trouble. You have a problem. And from where I'm sitting, about 3/4 of the problem is actually between your ears. That's where the problem is. You're weak. You're weak-minded. You're not going to do it. You're not doing it now, are you? You don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear it. And your denial will take you to a point where you break. Where you break. And Brian Pare broke. And he became the thing he feared the most. Someone is setting fires to make people worry about climate change. He became that. What do you fear? What are you worried about? Are you worried about fascism? What's the risk of you becoming a fascist to prove that fascism is a thing? Are you worried about great conspiracies and stochastic terrorism? What if you become a stochastic terrorist? You could. People do every single day. People do every single day. Stochastic terrorism is on the rise. Every single day, twice a day, 5 times a day. People become the thing they feared most. Who's going to be the next person to set fire to the forests? You think it's going to be a climate activist? You really think so? You're already thinking that? Hide the matches. Hide the matches.